That is a rare and hard to produce super alloy. It's about 100 times stronger than a good steel alloy. I was happy to see you could reproduce it when you made the pit walls out of it. Do you mind if I make these obstacles out of this? Midas asked. Yes, I do. If a flyer hits one of these obstacles, I don't want them hurt. You can make the base and poles out of the steel, but keep the obstacles the same kind of plastic they are now. Midas nodded as Virtuoso appeared next to him. Read my mind, he said to her. Virtuoso regarded Midas for a moment, then turned to look at Coach Spurs. Okay, I got the locations. Let's saddle up and be back by the time your child gets here, she said with a bad Texas accent. Coach Spurs looked away with a deadpan expression. Midas couldn't help but laugh. Virtuoso reached over and touched his shoulder. Then the two of them were out in the desert next to giant plastic rings and tubes held in the air by long metal poles set in the sand. The sand had shifted and tilted some of the obstacles. Midas handed the layout and description paperwork to Virtuoso. He then touched the steel poles and made them bend to the ground. Touching one of the plastic obstacles, he made it form a small piece that he could snap off. He put it in his pocket for backup. Next, Midas stood back, bent down, and touched the sand. A thick sheet of steel formed under the obstacles. Then the poles changed to some kind of steel. Why don't you stand up and have the metal come to you? She asked. That's a good idea. As Midas stood, the metal that was touching his hand followed him up and became like a cane. He used his power to straighten all the objects as they should be and then detached his new cane from the steel ground. I'm ready for the next one. Virtuoso touched him and they were at the next site. Midas pushed his cane into the ground and did the same change a little quicker. Soon the two of them were back next to Coach Spurs and Coach Hansen. Bobby and Jack were unloading red harnesses from a Sparrow. You run into problems? Coach Spurs asked. No, we're done. Midas started to look around. Is my lunch here yet? You're already done? Yep, I was a lot faster than yesterday. You can have Virtuoso show you if you want. Sure, said Coach Spurs. With that, Virtuoso reached out and touched him. In an instant, they were both gone. Midas' lunch had just arrived by running by. Midas smelled inside of the basket, and he couldn't wait to eat. As he looked around, he found there was no place for him to sit. He decided he was not sitting in the sand with his food. Midas pushed his new cane in the ground. Soon he had metal, and then a metal picnic table. The table seemed far too shiny in the desert sun. Midas put his basket on the table and started looking around at the ground. After a moment, he found a rock that he liked. Seconds later, the table was that kind of rock too. Midas then started enjoying his lunch. Coach Spurs and Virtuoso returned. Nice job, he said to Midas. He then noticed the table that hadn't been there. Jack had seen the table too. Midas, can you help me with something? Sure. Midas left his lunch to come help. I thought you were off for the day. Me too. They're running behind. They volunteered me right after you. Can you make us a clean floor with a roof to get us out of the sun? It would be great to have a place to work. Midas looked around at all the equipment they were unloading from the Sparrow. Sure, how about over here? He said, pointing off to the side. Anywhere would be great. Midas left his cane by the table and decided to make a new one. He touched the ground and grew a new cane up to his hand. He then made a round flat steel floor 30 feet in diameter. Extra steel came from a sand dune he transformed and made roll to the floor. The steel turned into 6 pillars that fused into the floor's edges at even intervals. The pillars held up the steel ceiling that he made next. It was simplistic, but didn't look that bad. Thanks a lot, Jack said as she and Bobby started moving boxes into the new structure. Yeah, you're not all bad, Bobby said with a smirk. Midas ignored the comment and went back to his table with Virtuoso. The hitters all showed up together like their own team. Olympian was their captain, and he walked right up to Midas. He was wearing a flight suit made of a blue metallic fabric. Is this the only table? Olympian asked. There wasn't even this one before he got here, Virtuoso answered quickly for Midas, who had food in his mouth again. Can you make more? Midas bounced his head back and forth for a second. He knew where the course was, and from where someone might get a good view. Let me talk to the coach about making some kind of stands for everyone. Midas walked over to Coach Spurs. The other students were arriving and milling about. Midas came back from conferring with the coach. What did he say? Olympian asked. Midas Construction Company at your service, Midas said. What's with the new look? Olympian looked down at his new clothes. Flight test. If you can go over a certain speed, you need to wear this to prevent friction or hurting the environment or something. Midas wondered what scientific reason there was for that. He walked away from the other students to get distance and have enough desert floor as building material. Olympian followed him. You have to stay back until I'm done. Olympian floated in the air and back. Midas touched the ground with his canes and turned everything to steel in a 100-foot radius, even farther down. He then made the metal move into a bleacher pattern, but it wasn't very straight and kind of blocky looking, like the pit. I can help, Virtuoso thought to Midas. How? I'm the artist, remember? I'll give you direction. Okay, how? Like this. Before him, an illusion started to take shape. Midas saw a beautiful gold and silver stadium section that looked like something an emperor with all the money in the world might have sat in. It even had silver poles overhead that could be used to drape something over, probably to act as shade. Use your power to make the steel follow the lines of the illusion. Kind of like tracing a picture, Virtuoso thought. Midas was able to do as she instructed. He couldn't get over how perfect it looked. He then changed some of the super steel to precious metal, while leaving the base still super strong. I want to raise it at least 100 feet in the air, on 4 steel pillars attached to the steel ground, and circular stairs going up. Might as well think big, huh? He then saw the whole illusion change and move up. He moved what he had already made up on the pillars. Then he focused on matching the circular stairs she had made by illusion. When it was done, it was a breathtaking sight. Virtuoso appeared next to him. Would you like me to take you up? That would be nice. Midas and Virtuoso were then in the precious metal skybox that could seat over 100. Midas looked up at the empty curtain poles. Too bad I can't do fabric, Midas said. I can, she said. There was then an illusion of red, orange, yellow, purple, and other brightly colored silk draping overhead. She continued to concentrate, and slowly her illusion became real. Are we good to come up? Olympian said from the ground. Are we done? Midas asked Virtuoso. I think we're very done, she said. Midas walked to the end of the balcony and the gold and silver railings. Everyone can come on up. Some flew to the top, and some ran up the stairs, but everyone stopped when they arrived inside. You made this just now? Olympian asked Midas. Me and Virtuoso. Olympian looked over at Orbit, who herself was looking around in awe. Now do you believe the kid? I do, was all she could say. Aid, the red shirt from Iraq, came over to speak to Midas. I didn't know you could decorate with precious metals like this. As she talked to Midas, Saber was quickly approaching. Do you know anyone else with a construction power like this? Saber said, ignoring Aid. I didn't know I had this kind of construction power until yesterday, Midas said. Do you realize the value this kind of power would have in the real world? This power could transform a desert, a slum, or a mountain into a city in weeks. Saber was showing the first emotion anyone had seen out of him yet. Your father is a construction executive in Dubai, Virtuoso said. Don't read my mind again, Saber said without looking at her. Midas didn't know what to say to the Arab boy. My father is an architect, and I loved watching him make buildings. I think if I would have known I could do this, I would have loved to help him build, but now I'm here. Saber thought for a moment. Well, if you ever leave the hero business, let me know. Saber turned and walked to a seat. This is a business? Midas said softly. In his family, building is a business, Virtuoso said. Several people came and complimented Midas and Virtuoso on their functional artwork Sky Stadium. They felt like they were colleagues or a duo the way people talked to them. Now this would be useful as a hero, IQ said to Midas from behind. How so? Superheroes don't just fight supervillains. One of the biggest things they do is respond to natural disasters. Think of bridges falling or tunnels collapsing and the people trapped. You could get them easy. If I was in charge of HU, I'd have your team on speed dial whenever an earthquake or natural disaster struck. IQ patted Midas on the back and went to sit down. Midas hadn't thought of how his powers could be used as a superhero. He'd been focused on how to get them to work. Midas looked around him at all the students sitting on what he and Virtuoso had just made. Where did the little boy at the science fair go? He thought to himself. He's being forced to grow up, Virtuoso said. Let's take a seat. She heard the two say they were going to get a seat. She remembered how long it took for her mother's bots to dig the tunnel under and out of Tokyo. Clearing out the space for the giant underground base took forever. She figured this kid could do it in a day. It might be good to get to know him and his enabler. Bioforce could see that she was thinking of asking them to sit next to them. We have room here if you're looking for a seat, said Bioforce. Virtuoso knew that she was making allies and Bioforce was following She's example. Virtuoso knew that Bioforce could be bossy and that they might not get along. She was in the process of thinking of an excuse to give when Midas spoke. Sure, that'd be great. Midas sat next to them and motioned for Virtuoso to follow. What are you thinking? She thought to Midas.